All right, today I'm going to do a demo on the primitive planning workflow. This was a lecture that I did at a university in person, but today I'm going to re-record it and give it to the people who want it online. The workflow is called primitive planning. Goal is to find out the timing, the spacing, and some of the poses, and just the camera movement. Basically, the feeling the energy of the shot, and doing this very quickly in Maya using like simple objects and some space switching tricks that I will show you guys in a bit. So the idea it comes from actually like thinking about your character as like a bouncing ball. Like if you think about your chest as a bouncing ball, your hips as a bouncing ball, just animating those main focal points in the body, but not spending a lot of time on it, but just figuring out the energy of the shot rather than posing at your character and stepped, like doing blocking or thumbnailing or shooting reference. So the primitive planning comes. You can shoot reference first, or you can do the primitive planning. But in this case, I'm going to talk about starting from here, going to planning your shot, and then shooting reference, and then posing on top of those boxes that we just created. Or you can actually paste your character rig on top of the boxes. And then layering, which is not animation layers, it's just layering your character inside out. And then polish notes, and then getting that into the game engine. We won't get into this, but I'll talk about these things here. Okay, so the primitive planning workflow is, I'll show you guys a little bit, but I watched this video a while ago, and this is Hideo Kojima's planning process. He basically plans the levels that he's creating with like Lego blocks, and you can see like he's putting a camera there as well to find out like how would that look to the player from the player's perspective, right? And the idea is very similar to this. We don't want to spend a lot of time, and think if you look at these Lego blocks, they're the same thing as the cubes and the spheres. A couple videos here. So if you watched it, think about as like a cube itself. Let's just draw a cube on him like that. It's just basically it's actually two parts. There's the head and there's the whole torso. But even though we don't see this bird's legs, you can get a feeling of the timing and the spacing and his emotion, the bird's emotion, right? So the bird is actually like the parrot, or I don't know if this is a budgie, but it's not really hitting any poses. It's just if you think about it as a cube, you can kind of see like how it moves, the timing, and you get what he feels. Like what is this bird feeling? You can still get the emotion from it just by looking at the spacing of the character. Same thing goes for this one. So this animal here, I think it's a prairie dog. So if you think about him as like a cube, like the main piece would be here. Let's include his head as well. And then another box that represents his arm here, his right arm here. This one, right? We can put this in Maya and animate those two cubes and still get this like funny timing of this emotion. He's just basically saying, hey, pet me. But you can get the whole emotion just by looking at those two boxes, right? He's being petted. He stops, thinks, processes the thing, and he gets up and, yep, pet me, right? And it's all about timing and spacing, right? He's not really hitting these, super dynamic poses, right? There are some really cool stuff on Twitter as well, Twitter X as well, where I'll share this link with you guys as well, so you can like click on these. There is some really cool stuff about spacing here as well, but it's all about getting that spacing motion. How much does it overshoot? Does it ease into the next pose? Does it hit the next pose and bounce, maybe do like overshoot, like cartoony. Um, and you will see that, I'll be working in the graph editor a lot with this primitive planning workflow. And if you look at the bouncing ball exercise, it's kind of like that. Bring up this part where it shows the arcs. Like when I'm doing the primitive planning, I focus on the extremes of the poses, right? So just like the bouncing ball, if I put a pose here and then I don't know, maybe like a pose here, and I do this in stepped or linear, it will just go all the way here, right? And it's not going to convey too much of like what's happening. And a good mindset to have when doing primitive planning is just focus on the extremes. Because if you look at this bouncing ball again, that's the extreme there. There's an extreme here, extreme here, extreme here, extreme here. And if I just focus on these extremes, if I play it, it will tell me how much it's traveling up. It will give me a sense of its timing, that the timing is going to be very bland if I use autotangents or linear. But it tells me where my character is going to like roughly end up in, right? We want to be able to start with less amount of controls. So I will treat the whole, like if I'm doing this, I wouldn't even like include the head. I would create one box that represents the whole character's torso, maybe it even represents the head. And I would just focus on just one controller at a time. So I would animate the hips first and maybe focus on, TY, TX, TZ, and then move on to the rotations, which I'm going to show you guys in a bit how that works. And then I would add, different body parts, keep adding to it. But yeah, that's why we want to focus on the extreme of the poses, because it tells us where we're going with it. If you're using Blender, there are some other tools that you can use. Some of my students use this in the past. The tool that I'll be using today is called Basic Overrig Scripts. It's a paid one, but I know this Blender one is pretty good as well, and it's free. Let me show you guys what I ended up with. I think this was like pretty close to polish. This is the animation that I'm going to show you guys today. So 2 characters interacting with each other. But if you look at this and this one, this was the primitive planning. This is like basically how I planned the timing and the spacing and the idea. And I also do, top view, side view. Top view is great because you can see how much your character is traveling in space. So for game animation, you want to be able to like make sure you're not animating to a camera, because the camera might change, or it might be like a multiplayer game, because we're not in games, we don't really animate to one camera. So that's why I use top view, side view, and like different views. Even sometimes I even use like bottom view as well, or back view. The planning was, I just started with this pose here. So I knew I was going to do a swipe, and as I'm doing this, I'm coming up with the idea in my mind. I'm feeling like I'm getting a feel of it, and I'm not spending a lot of time on these. Maybe 30 minutes, 20 minutes, just to get the idea. And my goal is to show this to if I'm working in a AAA studio, my goal is to show this to my lead and get feedback on it, right? And it tells the whole story, and it represents the characters that I'm going to animate. So I keep the size similar to the character rig. Okay. And then the second part was I came up with the second swipe on the yellow guy. So 1, 2, and then I made the guy punch him, like a quick punch, but I didn't like the idea. I did want to end up with like a wall finisher. Our player pushes the enemy to the wall, and then he's going to play a finisher. But you can see my camera is animated here as well. This is great because I can get a feeling of my whole shot, the energy of it, right? And then, yeah, I ended up with this. And then I finished the animation with a headbutt, grabs the character. And I was inspired by The Last of Us Part 2 finishers on this one. A Oh, another thing, this guy is really good, Alex Grigg. If you guys really want to like understand this, if you're even like animating in 2D, there's this. He has a video where he talks about the magic dot exercise. You know, it's basically the same thing that we're doing here. It's not a bouncing ball exercise. It's just playing around with your spacing with like one object, or in this case, he's just drawing a dot. And as you can see, he's figuring out the spacing, and he's just doing like a straight ahead pass. This is great to understand spacing and timing, and maybe you can like even convey the story with those little two boxes just by playing around with the spacing and just timing. Highly recommended. Alex Grigg's videos. It's really good. Okay, let's see. This is another one example that I did in the past. This is from a course called Primitive Planning to Polish. So in this case, I shot reference first. Let me try to play this again. Okay, so shot reference first, and then I animated the cube on top of my reference, and then I exaggerated those boxes, and then I pasted characters on top of those boxes. This is a kind of different workflow. This is another course, but a good example of like how to plan. Let's see, what else notes do I have here? Okay, that's it. Show you guys what that looks like in Maya. This was the final that I came up with those boxes. I animated the yellow guy first because he was kind of like driving the motion. And then dodge, dodge, wall charge, punch, punch, grab his head, and then headbutt him. And then, you know, he goes into this end position where the camera goes back to gameplay. And this is the animated camera as well. And the goal is to use minimal amount of controls as possible, if you can, because like, so you can focus on one control at a time. If you look at this scene here, I brought my characters in, these two characters. These rigs are from Kiel Figgins. I created boxes on top of these guys in the beginning, right? So, you know, create polygon primitives, create a box, and just a mask that represents his whole torso. If I click face here, maybe I can like scale this like that. But that's what I animated first, right? And if I click on this box, you see like the pivot point is somewhere around here. But I want to bring his pivot point somewhere closer to where the actual rig is, right? So if you look at here, that's the rig's pivot point of the hips. And if I click this box, the pivot point is up there. So using basic over rig scripts, I use something called a knot offset, which basically creates a controller and it offsets it to wherever you want. So my new controller is there. If I click an empty space on the viewport, I have a locator attached to that box, and I can only animate that one instead of animating the box. And I can, you know, keep changing these pivot points. It will bake the animation, so I have a hotkey that deletes all the animation. But this is my character, right? It represents the hips. So let me bring this guy here somewhere. And I mentioned that like you don't want to spend a lot of time, and focus on the extremes, right? So let's animate this guy. So let's say this character is doing something else. He's idling here. Let's make him idle for 20 frames, and I'm animating at 30 frames per second, which means 30 frames is just 1 second. So he's going to idle there a bit, go back a little bit, put down, and then hold there for a couple frames. And maybe he can go forward slightly. And sometimes I like to use motion trails to see like how much the character's traveling. And then maybe he can go up. He can do like a jump attack. And then here he lands. And then here he comes to a settle. But with these extreme poses, I have a rough timing. The spacing is not amazing. It's not really interesting, but it gives me a rough idea. And I was able to do this in a couple, like 1 minute, right? And if you have an idea, like you can look at your reference as well. You can shoot reference for more complex things. But that's the idea. You're getting those extremes first, just like I showed in the bouncing ball. And then the timing is going to be very boring. And you can start working on one curve at a time. So I have one control there, and I have six curves that I can start playing around with, and I can exaggerate this. Like let's say I want more hang time, I can break this tangent, this weighted tangent. I can stretch this out. Play around with this. I have the arc tracker there, so I can see how much I'm affecting it real time, right? So maybe I want him to fall harder there. I'll add a key. So he falls harder. Maybe he overshoots. So I'm adding those little details in the graph editor, and you can focus on like hang time. You can focus on overshoots. You can focus on some like anticipations, small anticipations, but you can do this in the graph editor, right? So let me do a demo on, I don't know, maybe we can add like a small anticipation when he goes, like a mini anticipation there. So instead of doing it here you can do this in the viewport as well, but I can do it very quickly here. I can set 2 keys. I can set 1 key in the middle, and I can add a little like small anticipation there. Little dip. And then maybe it's just like the bouncing ball. Maybe I can make him hop up. Right. So I have the timing. If the timing feels slow, again, you have 6 curves, literally 6 curves. And you can like, play around with the timing. Maybe it feels too slow. I'm just getting a feeling of one body part, one primitive planning shape. Okay. If I like this, if I like it, I can just select that. I can just bake this. You don't have to bake it, but I have a hotkey. I like to lock things down, so I just bake it down, right? Actually, let me show you guys the rotation as well. So for rotations, instead of animating the rotations like this, sometimes I like to use an aim constraint. Basic Overrig Scripts has this. I'm pretty sure other free tools have it as well. But I can control my rotation using these 2 locators, right? So let's say I want more like overlapping action. I can, offset this 2 frames. So I will break down the motion a little bit more. So watch when he comes down. So there's some like little bit of drag. If you look at the top, it's kind of dragging behind. You can do the same thing here. Let's say I want to lead. So I can drag this 2 frames this way. So I'm breaking down the motion, making it look more organic. So once you have this main chunk of the body, which represents the mass, you can keep adding to it, right? So let's just add a head to him. Let's just bake this down again. Delete those 2 locators. And let's create another primitive planning object, a cube, that represents his head. If I rotate this head, it rotates from the center, but I want it to rotate more from the neck, right? So I can do a not offset, bring it down, and I choose a new pivot point that represents the neck. It's going to rotate from the neck, which is going to look more natural. Click an empty space on the viewport, delete all the animation, my new pivot point, right? I can put that inside the hip space. I just hit P on the keyboard, parent, right? There's some weird movement there. Let's just delete that. Okay. So now we have the head. Look, let's go to the front view. We can, dip his head down. Just get some poses in there. Maybe he can stretch here. So we can dip down. Get some main extreme key poses on the head. The head is following the body, right? Maybe he can look at you here. So notice how fast that was. Again, I can merge that. And I can do the same thing. Like if I want to, take this head, right now, if I move the hips, it will move the head as well. But maybe I want to, just like the Lego blocks, right? The Lego block example I showed you, like I can put a Lego block on this blue block here temporarily, but I can get the motion and then I can separate that Lego block out from that space, right? So if I click this and I do a world, now if I move this, the head, it will still do the same animation, but the head now is in world space. You can, offset this 2 frames. So the head is kind of like coming from behind. Or if you want to lead with the head, we can drag this 2 frames this way. So the head leads the motion. And you can play around with this, but the idea is just getting the spacing with few controls as soon as you can. You can even export these cubes into the game engine to see, like, to get like a feeling of it, the scale of it. Just like the Lego block, the main driver, there was a weapon in his hand there. So I can start animating this right arm. You can create another block like that. So that represents my lower arm, or I can represent the whole arm if I really want to keep it simple, right? Pivot point is there, but I want to put the pivot point somewhere closer to the body. So it represents it's hinging from here, right? Okay, so let's do a knot offset. Put that there. Click an empty space. Now that arm is going to lag behind. But let's just delete all the animation and put this inside. If you look at these 2 locators, I'm going to put this one inside of this space, just like the Lego block. Hit P. Now the arm will follow the whole body. And again, I'll just grab this, get some added to an animation layer. You don't have to add it to an animation layer. I just like to do that. So maybe he can do something like that and just like hit you as he's coming down, like I don't know, like a Hulk smash or something. Right. Merge that layer. And again, right now it's in hip space. Hip space. Let's put the head back into hip space without breaking the animation. So instead of doing a parent, I'm just going to click this button here called inside. Right now I move this, it moves the whole thing. And let's take this arm outside back into world. If I move this, I can, drag and lead that arm. Right. So that's basically the primitive planning, but it should represent your characters in the scene. And from here, once you have that polished animation, you can pose your character on top of these boxes, which I'm going to talk about next. Okay. basically, yeah, look at this. They're pretty similar to the character size. And next thing is, okay, so once I have that, um, those boxes, so I can now shoot some reference. And I want to shoot reference because I want to see all like the little details of like what the body does. And I still have a hard time like not working with reference. I even though I've been animating for like a long time, I still don't trust myself to come up with some like what the body does in my mind. Reference always gives you some really good small details of like what the body's doing. Okay. For reference, I kind of wrote some like couple things here about these characters. This guy is going to be, much faster, more trained. He has big hands. So I was like, I'm going to make him use his fists, and he's going to finish with the head. The enemy character is more bulky, and he's going to be a little still trained, but like a little bit slower than that guy. I was inspired by Last of Us finishers, so I was watching some videos on that. So yeah, I shot some reference here, and usually, like when I shoot reference, I try to shoot. I try to use like one here, one from the side. One, two. This is for the big guy. I didn't shoot reference for the smaller guy, but I have a front view here as well, so I can see like all those little details, how much the torso is, bending, how it's bending. The reference usually helps you to see the feet as well, because like the feet always, it pivots from different angles, and the reference will exactly tell you how to do that, like what to put inside your poses in Maya, right? So yeah, I sync these videos. I brought into the side here, so I have one video, so I can see exactly. You can't really see what my feet are doing from the front view, but if you look at the feet, there's so much happening there, right? And I don't want to be able to guess that in my mind, especially like with the boxes, right? The part where he gets hit, where he's being dragged to the wall, I shot that part as well because I wanted to see like what can I get from there, like how will the weapon fall, and that's again front and side reference. Okay, you can also use quickmagic.ai if you have one video from one view, or maybe you're using like a person another like YouTube video or something. If you want to see it from different angles, you can upload it to quickmagic.ai, and it will give you like a model that you can import into Maya as an FBX, and you can see your character from different angles. So it takes out the guesswork. Quickmagic is pretty good. So I uploaded my reference there. The data is pretty good here, and I can use this as a reference as well. Just like reference, but I can see it from all angles, from top, from bottom. You can do that as well. So let's talk about posing. Once I have those boxes, if you are an animator, if you really want to like explore with step pose out, really focus on your line of action, you can do the same workflow, but just post it on top of the boxes, and you won't have to guess your timing and the spacing between those poses, because the boxes will tell you where your spacing is, where your character needs to be in that specific time in the timeline in Maya. So yeah, I think I got better at animating because I studied a lot of like body mechanics shots, like dance videos especially, to see like how the body moves, how foot pivots from different points. So reference is really important. I have this whole list. So I need to fix some of these and give credit to the websites. I made a whole list here about posing, but the main thing that I focus on is, you know, to make a pose more appealing is just like the line of action. Especially for game animation, like I really want to focus on simplified lines of actions, focusing on the, you know, the C shapes, the S shapes, reverse C and S shapes in the body. I have some images here. I still need to work on this and give credit to the people, which I will put uh, the credits in the description of this video. But I want to push the line of action a little bit more than what I have here. And this is a image that I got on Twitter. It's kind of like boring, but the animator the pushed the line of action, that S shape, a little bit more. And you can see like how much appealing it is, right? And there's twist, tilt, like twisting different body parts. And I got this one from cool animator, Brad Faucheux on YouTube. And he talked about, you know, thinking about your spine as a towel where you can like twist it. So when you're pushing poses, you can twist the upper body. And he gave that visual example of twisting like you're drying a towel. So this is great for like twist in the body. Tilt, this is great for like losing up stiff poses. And, you know, you can like, I'll talk about these later. And yeah, it's a bunch of posing lists here. You can look into it. There's like rhythm, thinking about the center of mass, where your character is like in balance, out of balance. A good book that I can recommend on posing is this book here called Character Mentor by Tom Bancroft. And he has a whole list of like really good examples of how to exaggerate some of your poses, right? And also studying Glenn Keane drawings. You can see all these principles in Glenn Keane's drawings. This is really important. Thinking about like if you're posing out like a main key pose, you want to be able to look at that pose like a action figure and ask yourself, does this pose look good enough as an action figure that I want on my desk? And you should be able to look at it, especially for game animation, from all angles and like ask yourself, simple question, do I want this pose on my desk as an action figure? If it's no, you just keep posing out and with these principles here. Okay, so let me pause this and I'm going to open up a new Maya scene here where I'm going to show you guys how I blocked my character on top of the boxes. So this is a early blocking that I did. As you can see, I'm just going to play it. I got the main extreme key poses in there. It tells me the story, but if you look at it, it's kind of like floaty, right? There's not enough in-betweens yet, but it's just going from extreme to extreme. That's why it looks a little bit floaty, right? You can see like how some of the boxes here, like the blue box is like leading the action where our guy is like dragging behind. There's not a lot of overlap and stuff like that. Look, there's not a lot of keys in there, but it tells a story. And if I watch it with the boxes on top of it, I can kind of get a feeling of, you know, the spacing. The timing is there though. Like those boxes tell me exactly where my poses need to be in the timeline. Let's do this. Yeah, so I have some keys on this guy as well. And I animated the camera to like frame them better. If you're an animator, you probably had this problem where if you're posing out your character and stepped, and then when you hit spline, everything looks, you know, floaty and there's like weird stuff going on. That's very normal. And that happens because like the spacing between the poses of different body parts are not really strong enough. They're not really interesting enough. Talked about, you know, layering here a little bit, which is the workflow about thinking about each body part as a bouncing ball on your rig, right? So if you look at these boxes here, every body part, the head, the chest, the shoulder, everything is basically a bouncing ball. Like you can flow between those poses thinking about bouncing balls. Like they can have different spacing. It can have a different space. Like one body part can lead, one can lag. You can add anticipations, small anticipations in different body parts in the graph editor. Like I'll show you how I do that in a bit. So it's not animation layers. It's just layering from the hip up, working outwards from the body. I have all the steps here. You can go inside and look at this. I started hiding body parts and just focusing on the hips of the character. Let me actually open up this one. I don't know why this. Okay. So think about your character's hips here in this, like when I'm going from pose to pose into layering, I start thinking about like bouncing balls. So one body part here, the hips is just like one bouncing ball. So I cleaned that up. I went into the graph editor and just like I did with the boxes, I started cleaning up curve by curve. Moving outwards from the body, I started cleaning up the chest. And then the head. You see those three focal points of the body, which are really important. Let's look at this guy here. Let's say from here, let's take this part where he's dodging and he goes into that pose there. This specific part here. Just going to mark it. So if you think about this hip as a bouncing ball, this is a really cool script that I got on Gumroad. It's from Animate. It's called Animate. You can select any controller and you can just attach objects to it. So I attached a ball there to his hips. Let's make that green. I can make this ball interesting, more interesting, right? If I go to the graph editor, you can kind of see everything is very linear here. I can start messing around with, the up and down, right? Here, maybe I can do like a double antic where he kind of goes up a little bit. And I have a hotkey that adds a key there, and I can just turn that into auto tangent. You can use weighted tangents, or you can just add more keys. It doesn't really matter. Let's say I want him to dip down faster there, right? I can play around with that instead of doing it in the viewport. It's just quicker that way for me. Let's make him go up earlier. Something like that, right? So immediately the spacing changed and there's more detail in that up and down curve of that bouncing ball, right? Everything is a bouncing ball. If you learned something out of this whole lecture, just one sentence, everything is a bouncing ball. We can mess around with this curve. We can hit earlier on translate X. See, that's a bouncing ball. Or we can lead comparing to that box that we had, right? We can make him get there faster. But I'm adding those imperfections of that, like motion capture gives you that, right? If you look at your curves and at like a really good motion capture data, there's always like bumps and it gives that organic, alive feeling to it. But once you have this bouncing ball, like let's say you did this towards the end on both characters, you can start working outwards from the body. So the next bouncing ball is the chest. Let's just put another ball on him, make that bigger. And that's another bouncing ball. You can use the graph editor. Sometimes if I want to kind of change the pose, sometimes I work with animation layers. So I can play around like what's leading with the body. Let's say I want to lead with the chest here. Let's lead with the body. Let's dip him down a little bit more. But I'm trying to break down those two bouncing balls, how they relate to each other. One can lead, one can follow, and this goes for every body part. That's how you get rid of that pose-to-pose feel in your animations. See that? So here, everything's coming up at the same time, but I can just, break that down. Just kind of leading with the upper chest. And then I can put this into world space. And now I can control this specific object in world space. It's not attached to the hips anymore. So let's say you want more squash and stretch. Yeah, you can play around with this curve. We can push the up and down on it, or we can offset it. Let's offset it this way so it really leads the body. It's not physically correct, but you get the idea. Like those two balls are separated from each other. And this goes for the head, goes for the shoulders, upper arm, lower arm, all the way to the fingertips. You can do this. That's the layering workflow. It's not about like animation layers. It's more about layering outwards from the body. So yeah, I shared this as well. You can go into it. I named it, the arm. This is how like I offsetted the arm. I put cubes on it to show you guys how things are moving at different speeds. Let's look at this one. So if you go here, I did the enemy as well. The enemy is a bouncing ball. Okay, so for polishing, I basically went frame by frame and just making sure these impact frames are hitting. I kind of like deformed my character's face when he's getting punched there. And just like small details like that. I added some facial animation here. And, really looking at this as, like I said, like, do I want this picture? I mean, in this case, I'm animating to a camera at this point, but I'm making sure like these pictures look good. If I pause at a random frame, I'm trying to find those frames where it doesn't look good. And I try to make it more appealing with all those like posing tips that I had, right? So punch. I'm adding all those like using animation layers. I'm adding wobbles and stuff like that. And I even like applied physics to his belly there with basic over scripts when he falls down. Polishing is, you can go forever with it, but I like to use arc trackers, putting different body parts into different body parts, maybe taking them back out onto world space and looking at them in the graph editor. And it's kind of hard, like whenever you're giving yourself feedback on your animation. So what I tend to do is I do like a play blast, and then I rename it to someone else's name, not like Stefan's shot. I don't know, maybe like Bob's shot, and I try to give Bob feedback because so my ego doesn't get involved in it, right? So, and sometimes if I'm using Keyframe Pro, I like to flip. You can do this with a mirror as well. I look at it from the mirror, right? Sometimes because it will tell me like all the little mistakes that I'm not seeing because you're looking at it so much, right? And another trick that I learned was, let's say your video is playing on screen and you just grab your phone and you just record your animation on your phone, including the screen, and you just look at it in a smaller screen on your phone, and you will be able to see from a different angle, kind of, right? And yeah, the workflow goes like that. This was like a shorter version of that workshop. But if you guys have any questions, let me know. And yeah, it's a really fun workflow, primitive planning, just really simplifying basic shapes of the body. All right. Cool, guys. Thanks for watching.